there's something else in here, the practical politics of this. Even if this were appropriate, what on earth is she talking about? Let's turn now to our own Jonathan Alter, senior editor at Newsweek magazine. John, thanks for coming in.
Hi, Keith.
I don't understand the premise. A candidate or a presumptive candidate has to leave the race for some reason. We'll make it a good race. He wins the lottery. He's become king of Norway. It's something positive, I don't know, or even something concerned with his family's health, something like that. If Senator Clinton were to bow out and suddenly the Democratic nomination were open again at any point up to the election, could she not step back in? Why make a reference like this if that's the case?
Well, she could step back in, but, you know, if she had, say, bowed out before there were primaries and hadn't gotten back in time, you know, then there are situations like this. For instance, when Tom Eagleton was forced off the ticket in 1972, where the Democratic National Committee then had to decide. So the delegates would figure out, you know, who to vote for, and if something awful happened to Senator Obama, which was the subtext of what we're talking about here, you know, she could have gotten back in and would have almost certainly become the nominee, although perhaps not if she had said something like this.
Yeah. Howard made a great point. The other practical political issue in this, the invoking of the assassination of RFK in June as a landmark, as a fixed time in the process, or even her husband clinching in June of 1992. It's apples and oranges historically, isn't it? Because in 92, the Iowa caucuses were on the 10th of February. In 1968, New Hampshire was March 12th. June then is not June now.
Right. And also the other thing that's really important to understand is the first part of her answer where she referred to her husband, that somehow, like, he didn't clinch the nomination until June of 1992 is preposterous. He had the nomination wrapped up for weeks by that point. Now, because California didn't vote until June, as a technical matter, he wasn't over the top, but the race was long since over. And so, you know, she's... I do compare it a little bit to what happened with the Bosnia business. You know, you do have to say that fatigue is a factor. I don't think any of us could have handled this, you know, this kind of campaign and the stresses that it puts on us. I think we do sometimes hold people too accountable for their verbal gaffes, but you do have to wonder what is going on inside her head. And a lot of her reason for staying in this race was not necessarily in the expectation that Barack Obama would be assassinated, but in the expectation that something cataclysmic would happen. And you have to argue, you have to wonder, is it worth hurting the Democratic Party for the possibility that something cataclysmic of any kind, whether a violent or a gaffe by Obama or something,
of some sort,
something happening, should she have put the Democratic Party through all of this over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, just on the off chance that something could happen? And you can tell that that was in her head.
But where is her campaign, never mind her head, right now?
Her campaign is over. Look, I mean, she was not going to get put over the top with the superdelegates with a big victory in Puerto Rico. There's nobody really, as a practical matter, left to vote now. Montana and South Dakota are tiny, and Puerto Rican votes don't count in a general election.
Right.
So she's not going to convince the superdelegates. She has lost this nomination, and she has probably lost her opportunity, which was small to begin with, of being the vice presidential nominee.
That flew out the window, too, today. Our own Jonathan Alter, senior editor at Newsweek magazine. As always, John, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Keith.
Is there any way to take that out of context, for there to be a justification of what Senator Clinton said and what was implied by raising the term assassination? And what is the right thing for her to do now? Historian Doug Brinkley, and later, my special comment. Matter of hours now since Senator Hillary Clinton invoked the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy in discussing the continuation of her own campaign, and then said she regretted it, especially as far as the Kennedy family was concerned. In our fourth story in the countdown, let's repeat the exact context. Speaking to the editorial board of the Argus Leader newspaper of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, regarding calls for her to drop out of the race, Senator Clinton said that, quote, people have been trying to push me out of this race ever since Iowa. Asked repeatedly why, and finally, did she buy the party unity argument? Her answer, quote, I don't, because, again, I've been around long enough. You know, my husband did not wrap up the nomination in 1992 until he won the California primary somewhere in the middle of June, right? We all remember Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in June in California. You know, I just don't understand it. You know, there's lots of speculation about why it is. Joining me now for some greater perspective, Professor of History at Rice University, presidential historian Douglas Brinkley. He's also the editor of the Reagan Diaries, out in a new boxed set this fall. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Keith.
Even with every benefit of the doubt, factoring in fatigue, thoughtlessness, carelessness, or that this was an inartful way of trying to make some sort of point about a timeline in a nomination process, how does any candidate say something like this and remain a candidate?
Well, I don't think she'll be a candidate for long. I mean, I think Hillary Clinton's been in a box for a while. She's looking for a rationale for a campaign. We know she's been fighting for Michigan and Florida, Keith. And I think this shows how desperate her mindset's gotten. She's really trying to say, bad things have happened in June, so I'm going to stay in the race. But as you rightly pointed out, you get out, and if something bad ever happens, you can always re-enter or be brought to a nominating committee in Denver. So she made a very grim mistake today, and there's really no excuse for it. And I think it's doing it will be seen as doing great damage to her persona and her biography.
For something this politically and historically charged, does the context, does the intent really matter, or is this a standalone comment? Is that the real box that she's in from what happened today?
I think we'd like to think this was just a mistake of fatigue, but she had floated something similar in March to Time magazine.
Yes.
So this idea has been in her mind for a while that, but for her to articulate something that dark means she's no longer really in the game. And I think that somebody has to intervene here. People that love her, care about her, and say, look, it's one thing to be the hard fighting gal who's not going to give up and no retreat. It's another thing when you make a comment like you did with USA Today, which created a racial division, and then you make a comment like this about Robert Kennedy's assassination. This is not Hillary Clinton at the top of her game. She should get out when she's on top. She's every day losing credibility with people. And I'm afraid, Keith, you can't make a Leno and Letterman types can't even make a joke about the latest comment because it's just so dark. So it's almost become now a kind of pathology we're dealing with. The humor of her not quitting is starting to not even be funny anymore.
Yeah, there's an awful sadness to this after today. Give me some context, though, on your bread and butter here. Why a political figure in this country should never use that word assassination. Is there any way to overstate the perniciousness of the thread of assassination in our political history?
No, and it's not just the Kennedys or Martin Luther King,
yeah.
But we've had attempted assassinations forever. And look at the black community with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King losing their two leaders. The word assassination in a context where you're working against Barack Obama right now, it's really bad taste. And I'm troubled that she didn't today come out and do the whole mea culpa apology, but instead kind of did a mamby-pamby, well, if I offended somebody, well, you offended everybody. So come out and try to come clean on it. So again, I think it's somebody who's in a bit of a depression and a meltdown, who's unable to, represent the best side of her nature, which we know because she's been a good senator. She's been a spirited person, but this was the low ebb of her campaign thus far and really of her political career.
And never referencing Senator Obama in that sort of half-baked apology either.
Well, I think you said it. There's something sad about it. When you heard that she did it, you recognize this is somebody who is a master politician and a great senator, somebody who, if she got out of this race and Obama lost, could win win the nomination in 2012, Senate Majority Leader, possible VP. And instead, you feel things going down the drain here at the end, this Friday. And I think her best bet is tomorrow to do something that's emotive and show that she realizes just how insensitive this remark was.
Douglas Brinkley, professor of history at Rice University, presidential historian extraordinaire. Thank you again for your time, sir.
Thank you, Keith.